All right, so to everybody listening, you guys know how this starts. The questions might seem the same, but every story is different. And today I have the amazing Tasneem that's going to be sharing a little bit about her journey. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Taz, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. Should not waste any more time. I would really love to know, when was your first breakout moment? The moment that changed everything for you and set in stone and helped you understand that, okay, this is where this is the direction my life is going in.
Yes, this is actually a very heartfelt story for me. From as long as I can remember, when I was a little kid, I always thought I wanted to either be a teacher or a pediatrician. I always thought I wanted to work with kids, but I always knew I wanted to be in a helping profession. And when I was in high school, we were required to do community service hours, like volunteer hours. And I did mine at a hospital in Cape Town called the Princess Alice Hospital. I was volunteering at the children's ward, in line with wanting to work with kids. There was like a long corridor because the children's hospital was right at the end. And as I was walking down the one day, I peeked down one of the corridors and I saw these two young ladies in green uniform, and they were playing with this child who, at the time, I didn't know what the child's condition was, but now I know the child had cerebral palsy. And the child was in like the seat and they were playing with the toys and things like that. So of course I was curious, what are they doing? So I went to speak to them because they looked young, they looked like university students. I went to speak to them and I asked them what were they doing, and they said they were occupational therapy students. And then they explained about play and how play is a primary occupation of children, and they use that in their therapy. And I was so fascinated by this. And from that day onwards, I just knew I wanted to be an occupational therapist. Everything else went out the window. And I had my heart set on that, applied for that. And I think I'm so grateful that I had that, because not a lot of people knew about occupational therapy then. And still now, a lot of people don't know what we do. But I'm so grateful I've had that exposure, because I love my profession. I really believe in the philosophy of the profession. And not only the profession, because I haven't necessarily always worked in a clinical setting, but the foundations, the philosophy of the profession, really, it formed part of my identity, both in a personal capacity and a professional capacity, and even in a business setting, like just the way that I operate, the way I see the world, the way I interact with other people. It's been really a grounding factor in how my identity has been shaped and the decisions I've made and the journey I've taken, basically.
Yeah, I love that. Speaking about how you see the world, what are the 3 characteristics that you just remember having at that age that someone else could spot within themselves and say, maybe this could also be a profession for me? What are those 3 things? Because off the bat, as you was explaining, it gave, who I pictured was a very loving person. Because to work with kids is also patience is very much involved. So what are those traits that you notice in yourself? If you could just share 3 that maybe someone else who's younger listening to this, watching this, is seeing in themselves or can see in themselves and say, hey, I also share those sentiments, and I think maybe I would be interested to find out a little bit more.
Yes, so what's interesting, obviously they say the hindsight is the best foresight. So I don't work with kids now, and I know I don't want to work with kids. But thinking back now, actually that's a great question, because the characteristics, it wasn't actually about kids. I think the characteristics were playfulness, creativity, and compassion. So those are the 3 characteristics. Like, I wanted to be in a helping profession. I wanted to be creative, not necessarily artistic. I'm not an artistic person. I can't draw to save my life. But creative in terms of creative thinking, problem solving, coming up with new ideas. But playfulness, bright, colorful. That's my brand is bright and colorful. So I think those are the things that, and I always used to say this. I used to work with teenagers. I used to do the school leavers exit program for a school with intellectual disabilities. And I always used to say to them, it's not about the profession that you choose. It's about what are the characteristics that appeals to you in that profession. So if you keep saying you want to be an engineer, what is it about engineering it's not actually about the engineering that you want. It's because you want to build things or problem solve,
Explore.
or do you know what I mean? It's a technical aspects which you can find in many other professions. So finding that, that's such a great question, because I think if you boil down to like what the core characteristics are that you want to live out, then you will find your path.
I love that. You also made mention that previously it was kids that drew you in, or that one situation where there was a child, and now you don't even want to work with them, right? So I want to ask you, what does success look like to you now, and what did it look like to you before?
I think when you're young, success is all about your future career and like what your future life is going to look like. For me now, it's really about being, for me, success is waking up with the freedom to choose. That's what success is for me. And of course, you need resources in order to do that. So I'm not going to be all Mother Teresa and say like you, I'm not after money and all of that. But it's what is the reason why money is important? It's because what resources do you need to have that freedom to choose? And of course, money isn't the only thing. Societal expectations, etc. As a woman, it is really difficult because you aren't as privileged to be able to make choices as quickly, as easily as men do, because there are lots of additional expectations, sacrifices you have to make as you get older. So for me, it's really about that, and it's also about having the freedom and ability to be curious and not just chase because you have to survive. You know, so when you're not in a survival mode and you can be creative and you can explore your curiosities and you can live beyond just your work and you can be present with the people that you care about, for me, that is, if you can achieve that, then that's success for me.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I feel as if when you explain the your success now, it's so positive, right? But I also want to know, has it always been like this? And specifically, what about those moments where you felt like giving up? How much of that did you have to draw back and remember that not only are you like you mentioned, you are a super mom and you're fighting different challenges of being a woman in this space as well and having to navigate that. So in those tough moments where you felt like giving up, what was that like?
So, I mean, just to clarify, when I define success, you never actually really achieve success, because success is something that you constantly strive for. Because we change as people, the world changes, context change, environment change, generations change, technology changes. I mean, if you just think where we are with AI now, that wasn't even there like a year ago. So it's never an end point that you get to. It's this journey that you on. I mean, the journey is the name of the podcast. The journey never
Yes.
ends. When the journey ends, you die. So you're constantly striving for that level of success. So of course, on that journey, you're going to meet many obstacles, and that's part of what builds your character, what builds your strength, what builds your resilience. So, of course, there are many times that I've felt like giving up. And I think the misconception people have about giving up and perseverance is that they think that, oh, you just need to have discipline, and discipline is like one, it's like this one thing you have, that if you have discipline in all areas of your life. It's not necessarily. Somebody can be extremely disciplined about going to the gym and then give up easily on something, learning an instrument, let's
Finances or
say, for
something.
example. You know what I mean? So and so the question you have to then ask yourself is, why do you feel that way for that particular instance? And so I often, when I feel like giving up, I first reflect on, like, why do I feel this way? Is it just demotivation because things are really hard? Is it because it's overwhelming? Is it because I feel like I lack confidence in my skills and my abilities? Is it because I'm meeting lots of external obstacles, you know, like legislature, or things that I have outside of my control? There's a really, I don't know if your listeners, I would recommend reading the book by called The Seven Habits of Successful People. And in there, he talks about the circles of worry. So the biggest circle is the circle of worry or concern, which are things that you have no direct control, influence over, like the economy, the unemployment rate, those kind of things. Then the second circle is the circle of influence. These are things you don't have a direct control over, but you can influence. You can't control how somebody thinks or what they say, but you can influence their perception of you through your behavior, right? And then there's the smaller circle, which is actually the one where most of your energy should be focused on, which is your circle of control. What do you have direct control over? And so when I feel like giving up, I usually reflect on which circle am I operating in. And then the second part of that is if it is something that I have in my control, then I can figure out and action it. But there's this thing of, we live in a society with social media. There's a lot of toxic positivity out there. And people are like, oh, you must give up and you mustn't give up and you must keep going. But sometimes it's not that you're giving up. Sometimes you need to pivot. And that's okay.
Recalculate.
Yeah, so you also have to reflect on if it's none of those things, is this thing that I'm doing still aligned with my core identities in this season of my life? Because your identity changes as you go through life, right? Is it still aligned with my values? Is it a priority for me right now? And if it's not, it's okay to give up, quote unquote, right? And giving up doesn't always mean giving up for good. Sometimes it's giving up that, okay, I'm going in a totally different direction. This is not for me. And sometimes it's right now, I need to put this on pause. Maybe I can revisit it later. And so I usually ask myself those things, and that usually helps me make a decision and either then move forward with the thing and not give up, or make a strategic decision to pivot.
Okay. And with all the change that you make mention of, what's that one lesson that stayed the same throughout every change that you've gone through?
So I think for me, a big lesson is actually, it's not like a philosophical lesson of any sort. It's very practical. I always say that if I could go back and speak to my younger self, there's one skill I would impart on myself, and that is financial literacy. So even if you're not working yet and you don't have your own money, that doesn't stop you from being financially curious and equipping yourself. In fact, it's better, like equip yourself with the knowledge and the know-how and like the lingo, and become confident so that when you do start earning money, that you know what's going on. So I think, and I think that's because even in my work with my clients, when we explore core identities and we put like your professional work streams and the personal aspects of your life, I always say financial must be on its own because it cuts across all areas of your life, right? So it's how you manage money, how your relationship with money, how you save, how you make goals and plans related to that, how you make decisions in your business or in your workplace. All of that stuff cuts across all areas of your life. So I think for me, that's the biggest lesson, is that most of the mistakes I've made have stemmed from not being financially literate enough, and therefore the ripple effect of being in a survival mindset because I didn't make good financial decisions when I was younger. Do you know what I mean?
I love that. I love that. And I think you even mentioning that, I see some of my struggles and my journey right now, because I'm also correcting the small mistakes where I was like, you know what, if I'd made better decisions there. But I love that. And what's the one lesson that in your journey that no one warned you about?
So for me, I think the thing that no one warned me about, again, this is more specific to me as a woman in society, is that as a girl, obviously growing up, you see the roles that your mother and your aunties and the women around you see the roles that they take, right? But nobody actually explicitly warns you about how heavy the invisible load is that women carry in society, and how many like choices you have to make, where it's something that you have to choose between such big important things. You can't just go out and do what you want to do, because sometimes you have to make a sacrifice. And it's not only women who have children. Most often it's women when they have children and start families. They have to make really difficult decisions. Like if you decide to take just 2 years off, that's 2 years out of your career, and there's this show on Netflix my husband and I like watching, called Younger, where this woman, she was a stay-at-home mom, and then her husband has a gambling problem, they get divorced, and her daughter is now a teenager going to college, and she's now in her 40s and trying to get back into the workspace, and nobody wants to hire her even though she has the skills. And so she now fakes her past ID and she lies about her age. Very light-hearted kind of romantic comedy, but it's so poignant about how, as a woman, like, you have to leave the workplace, make the choice of, do I leave the workplace to be there for my family and risk not being able to re-enter when the nest is empty, or do I give up that opportunity to fulfill all those roles, and nobody really warns you about how difficult that is, and how often you have to make those decisions, and how heavy the when I talk about the mental load, it's so difficult to articulate because individually the things you have to think about are insignificant and small. Like if you have to think about, oh, when do the kids need a dental appointment, that seems small and significant, but there are many. So those small things like end up this big rock on your shoulders, and nobody tells you how hard that is.
Yeah. I love how you unpack that. So I'm gonna throw it back at you, right? Looking back, what advice would you then give your younger self?
I think I would give my younger self the advice to be really clear about, or I think self-awareness. I think that's the thing, because if I think about the work I do with my clients, is that at a foundation, any healing or any skill development or any kind of growth and improvement always starts with self-awareness. So constantly reflecting on self, and what your skills and abilities are, and what your capacity is. Like so often women in particular tend to stretch themselves beyond capacity because they're not constantly aware of that. I'm guilty of that still sometimes, and I have to remind myself to like not overcommit because I want to be useful or helpful or validated as having value. So I overcommit to all kinds of things, even in the workplace. I'm not saying don't give 110% in your workplace if you're passionate about your work, but sometimes we go beyond what we should and stretch ourselves so thin, and that's why we have such a big problem with burnout these days. And if you have that self-awareness, it then impacts on everything. Like when you start entering relationships from an early age, whether it's in the workplace or romantic relationships or family relationships, the self-awareness that you have as a foundation is going to what helps set you up with assertiveness, not overstretching yourself, all of those things. So yeah, I think that would be the biggest lesson.
Okay, love that. And moving on to purpose. When you hear the word, what does purpose mean to you?
So, as an occupational therapist, like I should know how to answer this instantly because that is like at the core of occupational therapy. We're all about helping people do the things they need to, want to, or required to do that's meaningful and purposeful in their lives. It's all about purposeful occupation. So, but for me, I think that purpose is different for everyone, but at its core, it's about having, striving for something that is greater than yourself. Like you can have goals that's all about yourself, but that's not purpose. That goal is still connected to a greater purpose. And it's different for different people. For some people, that greater than self can be connected to spirituality. And of course, spirituality isn't just religion. It's some connected to something else, a greater power, a greater meaning, whatever that is for you, right? For other people, it might be rooted in wanting to make an impact, whether that's an impact just in your family or in your community or in your country or in the world. So why are activists activists? Their purpose is something connected to something greater than themselves. So is it impact, or is it something connected to legacy? Like, is there something you want to leave behind? If you think about a lot of people who come from poverty, they would like to generate generational wealth for the next generation. That's a legacy issue because they've never had that opportunity before. Whereas for other people who maybe don't have that, they already have that generational wealth. Maybe for them, legacy is how does their good name and reputation last for years to come. Like, is it an innovation like Steve Jobs? Like his legacy, his purpose wasn't about the machines. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, for me, that is what purpose is. It's like, and I think often when people feel like they lack purpose, it's exactly that, because they don't feel connected to something greater than themselves.
I absolutely love that. What would you say to somebody that feels stuck, lost, or left behind?
It's such a difficult question, and I wish I had a magical answer that I could give. Because it's so individual. It really depends on why it is that you're feeling that way. In occupational therapy, we have this model of human occupation, which consists of different subsystems. There's the volition subsystem, which is basically about motivation. Does a person operate from an internal locus of control or an external locus of control? And then there's the habituation subsystem. It's like, what are the habits and roles and responsibilities that you kind of fall into by default? And then, of course, there's your skills that you need to operate in daily life. And why I'm mentioning that is because the volitional subsystem is such an important one. A lot of times when you feel hopeless and like the world is against you, it's because you are operating in a circle of worry. You are focusing all your energies on things that you have no control over, and you are operating from an external locus of control. So you are so one of the core things that we work on in sessions is how do you get back a feeling of control. And you can't do that quickly. You have to identify the smallest things that you can control. So for example, I have a client who, she experienced a lot of loss, and like these are things you can't control, like, if somebody passes on or etc., and a breakup and all kinds of things. So we look at, in your life, what do you have control over? How do we focus on those small things and gain success? Because your brain is so interesting. Your brain is basically like a supercomputer, and computers don't have logic and feelings. They do have logic, but only in as far as the data that it is given. So it picks up patterns. That's all a computer does. It picks up patterns, makes sense of the patterns, and then goes according to the pattern. So your brain is so interesting in that when you constantly experience disappointment and loss and failure, you focus a lot on that, your brain picks up that pattern and thinks that is the normal way of operating. And then it constantly, in order to help you survive, you're constantly in this survival kind of brain mindset, right? And so you're operating that way. So the way what you have to do is disrupt the pattern. It's just like a computer, if you suddenly throw a virus in there, it's going to mess everything up, and then it has to relearn and you reprogram it. So you almost have to do that to your brain, where you have to disrupt that pattern. So you find something that is small, tangible, experience success in that, focus on those things, and then slowly snowball that, and what we call scaffold that feeling of success, so that you can start to regain a sense of an internal locus of control, and start to refocus on that small control circle rather than the big worry circle.
Great. Okay, I'm definitely learning a thing or two today. And now we're about to get into it. So, before the titles, achievements, and recognition, who was Tasneem?
So I'm a girl from the Cape Flats. I have a sister and a brother, and my parents, I think I learned a lot from my parents, in the sense that I watched them, so slowly grow their success over time. So from because I'm the eldest, I remember we first stayed with my dad's mom, in my dad's mom's house, and then we moved to like a separate entrance in his sister's place, and then eventually they built their own house, and then built on in the house, and over time. And so I think I saw that, and that kind of made me see that success is built over time. It's not something you just achieve instantly. But I think my entrepreneurial spirit really comes from my mom. My mom's late, unfortunately. She passed in 2016. But she was extremely, she was a true hustler. She would, if she wanted us to have world books, that time we didn't have internet, so you needed an encyclopedia set. So if she wanted us to have an encyclopedia set, she would be a encyclopedia sales lady until she built up the set, and then she stopped selling it. If she wanted the Tupperware range, she would sell Tupperware until she has everything, and so on and so forth. So she was a stay-at-home mom, but I went with her to the flea market in Gatesville. We sold muffins and stuff from when I was in grade 8 all the way through varsity. I went with her every Saturday, and our whole house on Thursdays and Fridays was filled with cake, because the store just grew and grew and grew, the amount of cake that we made. And I never ever thought of myself as entrepreneurial, because I was just in my mind I was going to be an OT and then I was going to go work. But that entrepreneurial spirit was there later on, and then when I reflected on it, it was from her, because that's where it came from.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think at the root of it, I love people, I love family, friends. I'm a very social person. And yeah, I'm from Cape Town, but been in Joburg for so long, but I'm still
Cape
funny cup at heart.
I absolutely love that, and I could hear that you come from humble beginnings. And I just want to ask, as someone who grew up in the Cape Flats, and you learn to have such a positive way of looking at life, what's your reason? What's your why? What was the reason for you to work as hard as you did, be able to have your children that you're able to take to mosque, the life that you built for yourself?
I think for me, it is about setting a good example. I think it's setting a good example for my kids and for the next generations. And um, even, it's that story about the starfish always stuck with me since I was young. They say if you throw just one starfish, the guy who's throwing the starfish into the sea, and somebody else says to him, like, there's so many, like, you're not going to make a difference. And he's like, but it makes a difference to this one starfish. That always stuck with me, because that's how I operate. A lot of the things that I'm involved in, it seems like, what is the point? You're not going to make a difference. But to me, if it makes difference to one person, and that has a ripple effect. So yeah, I think for me, my why is in everything I do. It's about what is the impact that I'm making on the next person, and by by consequence, and the ripple effect on, like, on the world. I have no, like, grandiose delusions of, like, changing the world or being the next Greta Thunberg or anything like that. I know my limitations, so my
Yeah.
purpose is more focused into individual groups and people and communities. And so psychoeducation, and, like, just teaching people about things that I've learned, that's really important to me. And it's interesting because, like I said right at the beginning, when I was a little kid, I always thought I might want to be a teacher. And if I think about it now, I kind of am a teacher, but just not in the
Yes.
traditional sense. So I still am teaching. That it is what I love doing, you know?
I love that. And when did you first realize that you were made for more?
I don't think I ever thought of it as I'm made for more. I think that I always, there's this quote. Um, I can't remember the quote exactly. It's on my LinkedIn profile, but I think it was by Helen Keller. But it's basically, the quote is saying that it's not about, it's not always about doing one thing, like, exceptionally well. Sometimes it's about doing many things to your best of your ability. And why that resonated with me is because I think of myself as a multi passionate. So it wasn't about being more, as in I'm not enough and I could be more than what I am. It's more about I can do more because I don't have to just be one thing. I can be multiple things. As long as I look after myself and, don't stretch myself out of capacity, like I said, like I've done before. But recognizing that there's so many dimensions to someone as a person. Like, you don't have to just define yourself by that one thing. And that's what more means to me. Not more as in you're not enough right now.
Yeah.
It's more the diversity of your
Yeah.
experiences.
I love that. And what's that one thing, part of your journey, that you think people don't get to see enough?
um I don't know, that's a difficult one. What do people not get to see enough? um I guess something that you said earlier, like you said, like, I'm a super mom. I'm not a super mom. I
You are. You
think
are.
I think I think what people don't see enough, because people always assume, because I have so many things going on, that they think that I have it all together. So I think the part of my journey that people don't see enough is that I do also have those times when I'm struggling. I'm also, just because you're teaching something, it doesn't mean you are perfect at that thing. It just means that you are a few steps behind somebody who is not there yet. And I think that's also the thing. It's like, and I say this constantly on my YouTube channel, on in my courses, I constantly say I am by no means the ultimate expert in this topic. I'm only can share with you from my knowledge and experience be what you don't yet know. There are people that are more experienced than me. So yeah, I think it's that. It's like that people don't see enough like that. There's actually somebody that also struggles with the same things they do. I mean, I do try to be more approachable and not like this expert person in my, public
Platforms and stuff,
platforms and stuff. But people don't see that struggle in the background, They just see the YouTube video magically appear.
Ta-da! Edited and everything.
And they don't see like the hours that it
Yeah.
takes that I don't get paid for
Yeah.
to edit and carefully listen and like transcribe and make all the collateral and all of that stuff. I think, they don't see the back. And I'm really bad at recording like things. I'm not good with like, people will constantly take pictures of behind the scenes, and I will go and do a talk, for example, and then not have a single picture because I forgot to take one.
And we are the same. And I work with social media. I work with content. I'll be so present, and I'll be like, later when you want to post, it's like,
Yes.
so I didn't take a single picture.
Yeah, I didn't take a single
Not
picture.
one.
Yeah.
I completely get you. And what are those sacrifices that you make that no one ever sees and claps for? The sacrifices.
I think it's time. I think time is the biggest sacrifice because there's a constant, and I think I alluded to in the thing of what people don't warn you about, is that time is the one resource. They say it's the thing that you can never replace, and it's not infinite. So you can use it up, but you can't replace it. So it's a constant toss up, and that's the kind of the contradiction is that when I said earlier about more meaning, not meaning variety and more aspects to yourself, but the more aspects to yourself there are, the more time that requires. And so sometimes it is a toss up between, well, do I spend time with my loved ones, or do I sit and edit this podcast after hours, because there's only so many hours in a day. And through the work that I'm doing with my clients, obviously time management is one of the executive functions. I'm not the best at time management. I'm good at helping other people. And what I've learned is that it's all about capacity. And capacity is about the time that you have available and the energy type that you have versus what is required to do. So if you have to think about, and that's a lot in my work as an OT with like energy regulation and sensory regulation, is that if a task, not all tasks are created equal. Like if you have to write a essay, that is deep focused thinking work versus if you have to just read emails, which is light work, right? So the type of energy that's required for each of those tasks are not the same. So even if you have the same amount of time to do each one, it's not necessarily what state are you in at that moment. And so learning, again, going back to the self-awareness, learning about your own, like what type of energy states do you have at different times of day, what affects your energy states, what overwhelms you, what types of environments, how do you set up your environment, and then making choices about like when you have to choose how you're going to spend your time and everything is equally important, how do you make those decisions? That's kind of something that I still struggle with and learning through and work with my clients through. But that's the biggest sacrifice is time. You have everything that expression that they say, every yes is a no to something else.
Yes.
So
100%.
if you're going to sacrifice time with something if you say yes to something else.
Yeah. And what mindset had to shift for you to start leveling up like this?
I don't think it was necessarily a mindset shift. It was more, unfortunately, it's just something you have to gain through experience. And I think that's the hardest lesson for young people, I think, to learn, is because it's like you just want to know everything already. Can we just skip to the part where I know the answers?
The end, yes.
But you get the answers through the experience. And as young people, must embrace that they are in a season of their life where they can make mistakes. It's not to say those mistakes aren't as horrible to experience, but you still have time and to learn from that. You can still recover from that. It's not like the end, like, So, yeah, I think that's I think the mindset as a young person is that there's how can I grow from this? And as an older person, the mindset is about how did I grow from this? And how can I take that forward? And how can I impart that to the next generation?
I love that. I absolutely love that. And do you believe success is about talent, timing, or tenacity, and why?
It's a combination, but I don't think you don't always need talent to be successful. I think tenacity is also important, but again, it's what I said earlier about also knowing yourself and knowing when you are going in the wrong direction. There's this thing about, when we talk about systems and processes, we talk about effectiveness and efficiency. And there's this saying about you can be so efficient, but if you're not effective, you're going in the wrong direction. You are being efficient in the wrong direction, right? So we always we live in a generation where it's all about speed and instant gratification.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's all about efficiency. How do we be productive and get the most done? Whereas success is really about first building the foundations of effectiveness. How do you hone your craft in this particular skill? Even if it's going to take a little bit longer, which requires tenacity because you need to be patient. And hard work can also only get you so far, though, because if you're going to work hard but never improve or never level up or never innovate or never develop your skill, then you're also just going to stay put and work hard in that same thing forever. So I always say, when with my clients, for example, who struggle, we do something called a person in context assessment, where if they're struggling to do a certain thing, we look at, okay, what is the activity you need to do? What do you need from a physiological, cognitive, social, what skills and abilities you need from an environmental perspective? And then what do they have available within themselves internally, and what are the misalignments? And then once we identify that misalignments, we say there's one of three ways we can address it. Either we can build the skill, and that's where talent comes in. If you don't know how to, if you're not a good footballer, but you can learn the skill, you can develop the talent in it. You're not going to be the best, most talented, but you can develop the talent, right? Through practice and repetition, etc. Or if you've reached your threshold of this is the amount of talent you have, you can learn the technical ability, but there's somebody who's naturally more talented than you. The next thing is, how do you have the supports? So are you in the right team structure, for example? Do you have good teammates that where you are lacking in your ability as a soccer player, your teammate, because it's a team sport? Or do you have a good coaching? Do you have good mentorship? What do you have as support? And then the third one is environmental adaptations. So, if you are finding that you are a soccer player in a hyper competitive, where there's lots of talented players, well-resourced area, it's very difficult. Maybe if you move to a place where it's smaller, you have a higher chance. You can get opportunity to play in structures that gives you opportunities. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not always about you as an individual. Sometimes it's the environment around you that needs to change. So it's really a combination of all of those things.
Okay, I love that. So after saying all of that, then how important is passion in what you do, and how do you then balance it? And I love that you touched on it a little bit earlier, so I guess we can go into detail now. But how do you then balance it with earning and also kind of surviving and loving what you do?
Yeah, it's such a difficult question because you also have to be realistic. And I often find when we listen to these podcasts of these entrepreneurs who have made it, it's yeah, but you're speaking from a place of privilege, and everybody has some privilege over somebody else. Even somebody who is really struggling still has something that they are more privileged than the next person. So passion is really important, but passion isn't everything, because you can have an abundance of passion, but you must remember, and this is a classic thing when it comes to entrepreneurship and innovation and all of those things. you have passion for something, but there's a lot of fringe things that happen around that passion that you're not passionate about. So it doesn't matter how passionate you are about this thing. If you don't have the discipline or the willpower or the desire or the motivation to do the things that you are not passionate about, I would say the things you are not passionate about that supports the thing you are passionate about is far more important and more difficult than the thing you are passionate. It's very easy to follow your passion.
Yeah.
Right? If you love DJing, it's easy to just like be on the decks the whole time, etc. But if you want to make it big as a DJ, you need to learn how to promote
Network,
yourself,
how
how to network, how to do the admin, the invoicing, the billing, the like
I see what
the
you're
not
saying.
fun stuff.
And if you don't love that, then this is going to be as fun. Because,
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you don't love that, that's fine. Then you have to identify those three things. Either you need to develop the skill and the discipline to do it, or you need to get a support system in place through a person or a tool or somebody to help you with those things. Or you need to, look at your environment and how does it support you in doing those things that you don't like. But you have to do them. And if you don't do them, you're never going to get anywhere. And that's what happens with people who have lots of great ideas but never implement. Because the idea is the passion. The implementation and the horrible stuff and sitting and emailing and writing up proposals, that's the unfun stuff that nobody's passionate about.
Now I feel attacked. Now I feel so attacked.
So yeah,
Okay.
bottom line is passion is super important because it's the thing that sparks the ideas, the creativity, all of that. But it's not the thing that's going to get you moving and make a success of your life.
So what keeps you motivated then? When let's put away money, let's put away praise from the family, let's put away all those things. When all of those things are silent, but it's going haywire, what keeps you motivated to keep on going?
Well, to your point is that the passion is what motivates you. But then you need to tap into that all the time about why am I doing this? Is it just because if it's that important to me, am I willing to sacrifice my time and my sleep and my fun to do this unfun thing because I know it supports it? And so it's really about, I think for me it was learning how to think more strategically. As I've gotten older, I've become a bit more strategic in my thinking. I was always a very I have an idea and I'm just going to do it, right? But over time, I've learned to actually make a plan, think about it, break it down. What does this actually require? How much time, how much capacity, how much energy is this going to take from me? What if I say no, yes to this, what am I going to say no to? Thinking about all those things strategically, and then also thinking outside of myself. What support am I going to need? What are other people going to have to sacrifice for me to make this decision? And when you think strategically and you have a strategic plan, it's much easier to find the motivation, because when things go wrong, you can go back to the drawing board. But if you just kind of jump off the bridge and then you I'll figure
Going
it
with
out
the
when I
flow.
get there, then you have no grounding to start and say, okay, how can I adjust? What can I tweak? What can I change, etc. But to your point also about the money story and what I was talking about with privilege, it's so difficult if you come from a space where you don't have the opportunities and the resources. And I think it's very easy for people who are middle to upper income to say, oh, you just have to work hard. But my pet peeve is that expression that we all have to the same 24 hours. I say this all the time, but we don't. I know my helper has to wake up at a ridiculous hour just to get to my house
On time.
before I go to work. She doesn't have the same 24 hours because I get up the same time as her, but in the time that she's been traveling to me, I've been in the comfort of my home. I can make time to pray, and I can do those things because I have privilege over her. And so we have to recognize that. And it's not to say that you must feel sorry for yourself when you recognize that you don't have the privilege. It's about being honest and realistic. And it's okay to want to get to a point where you have financial stability. It's okay to want to chase money and wealth to get you out of that survival mindset. But if you think about it strategically and your goal is always to get, and the financial literacy and all of that comes in, that how do you then not constantly take from that money? How How do you put aside and like start to build a nest so that you can get yourself out of that survival mindset?
I love that. And what advice could you give to someone who is just starting out? Just
Yeah.
finished tertiary, figuring out what adulting is, all
Yeah.
of these steps that you're speaking about. What advice
Yeah.
would you give them?
So my advice that I always used to give the high schoolers is that, I mean, and I have 4 kids now. The youngest is going to high school next year, so I'm going through that like young adult phase and things like that. And when I worked even with the young kids in the high school, I always say that the only thing that is constant is change. Everything changes. So, you make the decisions based on what you have information you have available to you right now and what the world is now, but know that nothing is set in stone and you can always change your mind. So my other pet peeve in the education system is the amount of pressure we put on young people. I mean, my daughter is now in grade 11, and I remember when she was making her subject choices in grade 9, there was so much pressure on, like, you must take the right subjects.
And how you need them for life.
Yes, yeah. And then I'm like, but you can always change your subjects later on. And yes, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, it's going to be very hard, but you can do it. And also, then there's pressure on, like, you make the choices based on what you want to be for the rest of your life. Like, you don't know in 20 years' time what jobs are going to exist that don't exist today. I mean, I used to say this to my high school kids all the time. I used to say to them, guys, when I was your age, there was no Facebook. And they say, yo, ma'am, how old are you, ma'am? Then they can't believe it. And I say, yes, but my point is, there was no such thing as a Facebook manager. Nowadays, like, the young people aren't even on Facebook. so
It's so
I
crazy
mean,
to believe.
do you
But
know what I
Facebook
mean?
is popping.
And now it's like, and this I was saying to them, like, 7 years ago. Now there's even more jobs that don't exist because now we have AI. Now you have AI engineers, prompt engineers, all of these things that didn't exist like 5 years ago. So how can you tell a child now that you need to make a decision about what you're going to be for the rest of your life when you don't know that in 5 years' time that there's going to be a job available to them that they're going to absolutely love that they didn't plan for? So my point is, you take the information you have, you look at your strengths. Again, it comes back to self-awareness. I said to my daughter, if you want to take math core because it's going to improve your chances to get into varsity, look at what types of degrees need math core. You aren't interested in any of those, so why make yourself life hard? But she wanted to at least give it a try. So I'm not going to discourage her. So she's like, okay, I'm going to give it a try. And if I find that I struggle, I'll drop to math lit. I'm all for that. And so many parents are like, no, you must stick it out and we'll give you tutors. Why make your life hard when you can excel? And in high school is not supposed to be. I mean, you can't even remember half the stuff that you learned at high school. Right? High school it's not actually about the content you learn. It's about learning to manage your time. It's about learning to work in groups. It's about learning to articulate and express yourself. Those subjects is teaching you how to think. And it's also about developing your identity and finding out who you are. And you can't do that if you are so stressed out of your mind because you must get a certain percentage in a subject that you hate and you're not strong at and you're never going to need because you're not going to do medicine or science or whatever the case may be. So my advice to young people is really get to know yourself, understand what your strengths are, make decisions on what information you have, but know that you can always change your mind.
I love that. Before we move on to quick fire, I do want to ask this question because you did touch on it. And seeing that you also have a daughter who's about to matriculate, how is it that, as parents, sometimes when it comes to schools and the grade 1-2 matric era, we'll always make sure that our children will go to the best of the best, or at least a standard that we really believe in. But then the minute it's tertiary, we all of a sudden forget private, and the first thing is they need to get into a top 5 government institution where we know that spaces are overpacked. And the pressures also of getting in, because let's also not act like there's no pressure of getting into one of those varsities. What is your opinion on that versus the private institutions, seeing that there's licenses being given to institutions from the private sector that are coming together? What's your take on that?
So I think it's like across, even with schooling, I have this thing of like, you know, s- it's great when kids have like pride in their schools, and especially like in the boys girls schools, like
Yes.
that's rooted in tradition. Wonderful. I went to a girls school, very proud of my
Yeah.
school, etc. But I always say, like, you don't have to, the pride that you have in what you have doesn't have to be at the expense of someone else. So what I often find is somebody is really proud of the school they go to, but then they're constantly like comparing and saying, "Oh, but your school doesn't have that." If you have true pride in what your school offers, it would stand on its own, irrespective of what another school does. I'm not talking about competitiveness. Of
True.
course, you must have
I love that.
the
I
sport
understand
competitive.
you.
And I find that in my circle, right? And I always think about the fact that I went when I was in primary school. I went to a school that had no sports fields. That like it was like it was a little Muslim school in Weinberg. We used to walk to the park to go and do our in-house training or whatever, right? It made no impact on that. That doesn't matter. Yes, obviously I'm going to put my kids in the best school I can manage to afford, but at the end of the day, it's the school that it just improves their chances, but it's all about the child, right? And what they put in and how much they use. There was a neighbor that I had who they lived like on the property of family, which was our neighbors at the back. She lived in a little shack. They didn't have electricity. She studied by candlelight every night. She matriculated, went on to study, ended up working in corporate. It didn't matter that she didn't have all the things I
The
had.
amenities and stuff.
You
Yeah.
know, it made it harder, but she was able to do it. So when it comes to tertiary education, it's also that same thing. I mean, like I said, I worked at a school for kids with a moderate intellectual disability. It was like a vocational school. So they were taught things like hospitality, woodwork, metalwork, sheet metal, beauty, nails, all of that stuff, right? So when they leave the school, they actually have equivalent of an NQF level 1 in the skill, but they don't have a matric. And all of them, when you say what do you want to be, they all want to do things that require them to have a university. They all want to get into university. And when we have the meeting, you know, as part of the exit program, we tell the parents your child is not going to have a matric. Like the matric is so important, which I understand why, because in South Africa we've placed such a big emphasis on
On
it.
having it.
And now you think, but the matric pass rate is so low, whereas our education system is still geared up to that industrial revolution where you need a matric so that you can get into varsity, so you can get a good job, as opposed to also equally recognizing the skilled professions. What happened to the days when you had apprentices, when you could leave that was standard 8. I don't know, that's grade 8, 9, that's grade 10. You could leave at grade 10, go to a vocational college, go and do a skill and become an apprentice. And a lot of those people have businesses now. They are now the now big plumbing businesses and electrical businesses. We've kind of lost that. So I understand parents' need for, I think it is more of a status thing. You went to university, you got a degree, but there's nothing wrong with going to a college or a technicon, provided the institution has the right credentials, that they are accredited by the Department of Education, that they have, you know, all of that stuff. There's nothing wrong with going and getting. I know many people who have made huge successes out of their life when they've gone to a private institution and studied media or art or, you know, marketing and things like that, and they've been more successful than people who have gone to university sitting without jobs. You know, so I think, we just need to broaden our minds, and it is the parents. The parents want the best for themselves, their kids, and we also have to check in on our prestige odometer, I would say. Like, is it really about the degree and the opportunity, or is it the prestige of knowing that your child like got a degree at the university?
Yeah, I like that you added that because I think I'm not a parent yet, right? But I think of my siblings. So I also lost my mom just recently, and being the firstborn as well.
Yeah.
I think of that, and I think that, you know, I was fortunate enough that out of my siblings, I was the one that went to a really good school, and I finished at a really good school. Yes, I didn't go on and study tertiary and everything like that, but I share the same sentiment. I never thought it was important, but I did think your network and learning the actual skill and being behind or shadowing somebody to actually teach you what you want to go into, I thought that was very important. And for me, it was the acting and everything like that. But just to finish my point, it was I also now find myself in that position where I want generational wealth for them. Or I at least want to start thinking about the ones that are in primary school right now. When it's time for high school, that I have enough resources at my disposal to say, hey, if you want to, if you want to move from that school and you want to go to a school that offers more of this or that, then I have worked hard enough to give you that. And obviously for my kids as well. So I think there's an element of seeing yourself in them. And I think for me, it's the opposite of where it's not, it used to be guilt that I was the fortunate one in the pack that went to that. So I felt that it was my responsibility to take care of everyone else. Now it's just obviously as a firstborn. But I think we see ourselves in their stories and in their journeys. And if you're able to, you always want to make sure that you do that. So I share a lot. I agree with a lot of what you
But
say.
I think also, again, going back to the thing about privilege, we have to also be realistic that I do also recognize that for a lot of parents, especially from non-white communities, that it's not so much about the privilege, but knowing that unfortunately your kids are not going to have the same opportunities. They almost have to have more than the next person in order to prove their place there. So I do also recognize that, because a lot of our kids did come from those communities, and it was like, I know even in my own community, it's like there's still that status attached to going to universities, because you know that that's going to give you a leg up from somebody who doesn't. But I also want to say, like when you said about you murder, with your siblings now, and I think going back to with my parents, I think part of that influence of how I think about things is knowing that my dad, he is where he is today, not starting with a university degree. So he was always into computers, he was always really super intelligent, and he went into his first job they couldn't afford to go to university, and he self-taught himself like computers, and that was before there was even computers. I mean, like,
The boxes
Yeah.
actually.
And he actually, without any formal education, ended up doing information systems, that he was then granted permission to do an honorary, like he could skip the undergrad and do the post-grad. And now he's an information systems auditor. Do you know what I mean?
Wow,
where he then did go to, and I went to his graduation when I was at varsity, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he didn't have the university because he wasn't allowed to go to study those things, because it was still in the apartheid time. So he wasn't allowed to be anything in that, sort of category of things, and he couldn't afford it. And, all the other, disadvantages that he had being a colored male. So that's why I'm saying, like, it's not necessarily that you have to go to university. And I'll also tell you another story of a friend of mine who, she always wanted to be a doctor. So there's certain things that you have to go to university for.
100%.
Like
Agreed.
I
Medicine
went
is
to
one of-
university because I could only study OT
Yeah.
at university. I would have gladly gone to a college if I wanted to do stomatology or one of the other things I was interested in. Sound engineering was one of the things I wanted to do. But I had this friend who wanted to be a doctor, but she was like an average student, like 60s, 70s. So she wasn't going to obviously get into medicine. But she's now a neurologist or something like that, working in Canada, because she went and studied something else and applied later and then got in. So again, things change. You can change your mind. There's a different route. It might take longer, but you can get there. So yeah.
I love. What's one book, quote, or person that has changed your life?
Atomic Habits by James Clear. I don't have to think about it. It's changed my life.
Love that. What's your definition of the journey?
I would say my definition is that it is perpetual, ongoing, and all about growth.
Love that. What does success feel like now, and how has it changed over time?
Success now feels, like I said, striving towards having freedom in whatever form that means. Economic freedom, geographic freedom, religious freedom, who you love freedom. For me, that's what success is now. Versus when I was younger, success was about achievement and, having a job and earning money. It was very much like tangible things, whereas now it's more non-tangible. Yeah.
Love that. Favorite movie or series currently?
I am enjoying Stranger Things.
Okay. Have you always been a Stranger Things fan?
No, so I never watched it, and then obviously there was a big fuss about, because my daughter watches it, and there was a big fuss about season 5, and then while I'm in the kitchen I can see the TV, and I saw some of like what was happening, and there was like, I don't usually like that kind of science fiction kind of movies, but I was like, I'm gonna watch what all the fuss is about, and I started watching season 1, and oh my word,
that's right.
My daughter was actually laughing at me because then she was watching one of the episodes with me, and I'm like, she's gonna do this, and I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. I love it. So I haven't finished season 5.
Yeah.
Because it's quite long, the episodes, and I have to watch it when, like, my husband doesn't really like that. So we usually watch something together. That's why we're watching that younger show.
Yes.
But when he falls asleep, then I put it on.
Love. Current favorite song?
I don't have a favorite song, but I definitely have a favorite artist, which my husband always teases me about. It's Neo, because whenever Neo comes on, then he's like, "No, please put that off. That's all your mother listens to." I didn't realize that he was my favorite artist, but I noticed that he's on every one of my playlists.
Wow!
So I have a playlist called "Songs I'll Never Get Sick of." And the rule is, the minute I skip that song, it needs to come off the list. So I have songs on there that if I'll listen to it, and he's got quite a few songs on that list. So.
Miss Independent it is. Love. And last but definitely not least, if a shoe could describe your journey, what shoe would it be and why?
So I'm glad I didn't try to think of an answer, because I was like, I don't know. But the minute you asked me that now and I had to come up with the answer, I know this is going to sound so weird, but the image that comes to my mind is a flip-flop.
Please, can I stop you right there? You will not be... Okay, first explain why a flip-flop.
I think because the flip-flop for me represents so many different aspects of my life. One is because I'm from Cape Town and the beach and all of that. Yes. 2, I never actually liked I always thought I didn't like wearing flip-flops. I didn't like the idea of the thing between your toes. So I never had flip-flops, like through all my young years, whatever. Until my sister gave me a pair of Havaianas, however you say it, for my birthday when I was already an adult and had children. And she's like, I promise you, just wear it. And I wore it, and now I love my flip-flops, right? I love flip-flops. So I think it also just represents, like, how the change, like you change as a person. And also if you don't try something, you're never gonna, this preconceived idea you have of something. That you don't like something. And maybe it's because I tried on a flip-flop that was really hard and uncomfortable. And then in my mind, all flip-flops are like that. So it was that also. And then also I think because, I grew up in an era of, like, our parents used to still use corporal punishment. Right?
Yes.
So now I became a parent and we no longer do that. But I still, like, wave my flip-flop around.
There's something about doing the action.
Yes, so I still like wave, because it's nice and floppy, right? So I still... I'll never use it on them, but I still like wave the flip-flop around. And I think it's also just because it represents that change in generation, like how better understanding of, like, your children's regulation and, like, all these things.
The emotions.
So it's that. And then I think also just the casualness, like I said right at the beginning, like, for me, the characteristics of playfulness. I'm not a heels and... kind of person. Like, I hate wearing heels. I like wearing flats and tackies and things like that. So that side of me, that just the down-to-earth, approachable, everyday kind of person who just is doing, stuff in her flip-flops.
I love that. The reason why my eyes shot up, literally the last person that sat in that beautiful seat. Yeah. So I read it. So she shared her answers back.
Yeah.
And when I saw it, I came running to come tell Care, and I said, boss, You won't believe it. We finally have somebody. So we've asked many different people.
Yeah.
I had the fortune of asking Prof. Tulima Donsela and Leila Furi,
Oh, wow,
the CEO
okay.
of Chase, and they said different things. A
Yeah.
mountaineering shoe, and they said all this because
Yeah.
in corporate you need to be hard as a
Yes.
woman, and they've achieved so much. It made sense, and
Yeah.
I finally get this one that says what I saw at the time. A flip flop.
Yeah.
So I come running and I'm like, boss, you won't believe it. We have a flip flop. And she's like, why a flip flop? Like, what is this? And I sit down with her finally and I'm so excited to ask the question.
Yeah.
This is where my ADHD took over. She also, same thing. So it was crazy. We sat down here
Yeah.
for like 4 hours. Anyways, so as I ask the question and I say, so why a flip flop? She says, just to correct you, a fit flop.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
That's exactly what I said. I said, what? So I got educated on what a fit flop is and a
Okay.
flip flop. So it's just very interesting to find out that just a week apart, we
Yeah.
then finally have
A flip flop. And also,
Finally.
just what you said now about somebody saying about being hard and all of those things. That's the other thing about a flip flop is it's so flexible. Those rubbery ones. And for me, that is one aspect of myself. I'm extremely flexible. So yeah, definitely a flip flop.
I love that.
A
Absolutely
very
love
colorful
that.
one.
This was absolutely amazing, Tasneem. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I think sitting down and just unpacking so much that you were just giving to us. There's a lot that I wanted to go into, but I was like, oh, this is not about ADHD and this is not about making sure that, you're gaining skills. But
Yeah.
just to elaborate one last time before I let you go, what are those 3 things that you kept referencing to so
Yes.
much? If we could just unpack that slightly, just 2
Yeah.
minutes to unpack that, just so I can also then educate my viewer.
Yes, so when there's a misalignment between what you have available to do the things you need to, want to, and require to do, and what that thing needs in the context that it is needed, there's one of 3 strategies. You can either develop the skill. So if there's a skill gap that you have, and you can develop that skill, so you can work on that skill. So let's say, for example, if you struggle with memorization skills and you have to have a good memory for something, you can develop your memory through different methods. Or you can or there's a support. You can put in place a support, and a support can be a person, it can be a tool, it can be a resource. So for example, with ADHD, a very popular one is body doubling, or where basically it's quite effective if you need. There's this thing going around social media right now where they talk about adults having admin parties. I don't know if you've seen that, which is basically body doubling on steroids. So it's essentially like a bunch of adults, and my friends and I have joked that we're going to do this. Like, this one needs to book some appointments. This one needs to do a taxes, and I need to do whatever. When we get together and we have like a schedule, we're gonna say this is what we're gonna do in this hour, and we're gonna sit down and do it, and then afterwards we're gonna have a party.
Wow.
So it's kind of body doubling is this concept where you have a person who is sitting there and holding you accountable, and you're more likely to do it. Or accountability partners. It's exactly like that. You get a website called Focus Mate, where you go on and you basically you meet with some stranger online, but you don't exchange any details. You say, hi, I'm Tasneem, and right now I want to finish editing this video. And then the other person says, hi, I'm John, and right now I need to finish editing this whatever. And they're like, okay, good luck. Then you work for an hour, you leave the camera on, no sound, and you work for an hour, and then at the end you have to come back and say how much did you manage to do or not.
I love that.
It's a free service. You even get that now in Korea. They have focus cafes where you go into the cafe and you have to write on a piece of paper and give it to the waitress or whoever and say, this is what you're going to do. No one's allowed to talk, so it's not a social place. Yeah, so those are the kinds that's a support. Or it can be a tool. So, things like reminders and all this technology we have these days that can help you, support you to do the things you do. So that's the second strategy. And the third strategy is environmental adaptations or task adaptation. So sometimes you change the way, the task to fit the person, or you change the environment in which they do it in. So for example, I used to work in my younger years as an OT, I used to work with spinal cord injuries. If somebody has a spinal cord injury, they can no longer just get up and go to the toilet. So they first they have to do a combination, develop the skill of transferring themselves, but they change the activity. Now instead of going to the toilet like you normally do, you use a transfer board. You've changed the activity to suit the person. And they also have to learn the skill of doing that activity in the new way. Or in a case of changing environment, when we look at, with my clients, when we look at sensory profiles, if say somebody is extremely distractible because they have a very low threshold for sound, meaning that they pick up all sounds easily, or they become easily overwhelmed by different sounds, an environmental modification might be working with noise cancelling earphones
Yeah.
in. That's a simple adaptation that can make a big difference to your productivity. So yeah, basically we look at which of those three strategies are going to be the best fit, and sometimes it's a combination of all three.
I love that because you kept referencing it and it made sense in all categories that we kept speaking in. So it was very fascinating just to know what these. But okay, we're definitely going to look up more of these. But thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful for your time. And until the next one.